what is your position on free will? So, first of all, in paraphilosophy, there must be a perfect correspondence between the subjectivistic perspective of being a conscious subject and the objectivistic perspective of there being a world evolving purely in accordance with natural laws. And on the side of the subject, we have an idealistic theory in which free will is necessary. And on the side of the object, we have a materialistic theory in which everything's determined by prior states. Now, these two ways to approach metaphysics must be perfectly correspondent with each other in paraphilosophy. And this is again due to the necessity of a kind of double aspect monism between the ideal and the material. And so the nature of free will is an interesting and difficult question, but I'm fairly certain at this point that the answer lies in a proper interpretation of quantum mechanics, wherein the apparent randomness of quantum mechanical processes and wave function collapse must conceal some kind of hidden variable, and these hidden variables must provide a correlation between free choice and pure determinism. I think now normally that would be a contradiction, but in a double aspect theory, there can be a correlation without there being a causation. So what this entails is that conscious thought involves some kind of quantum mechanical process, as does the neurological processing of the purely physical aspect of thought. And therefore, the cause of thought, subjective thought, cannot be statistically independent from the purely mechanical results of neurological firings in the brain. And therefore, quantum mechanical events in the brain, neurologically, are caused by hidden variables, but also the purely subjective experience of choosing one thought over another is caused by those same hidden variables. And therefore, you can see that this is not a physicalist ontology. The hidden variables are neutral to both, but they have two aspects. And that the fact that they're neutral doesn't break the deterministic causal change, because everything ultimately is an aspect or an expression of some neutral substance. So now, to really answer the question, we need to solve quantum mechanics. I think, as far as I know, the current models, and I should say first that hidden variables are not allowed in standard interpretations of quantum mechanics because they violate Bell's inequality. But there are a couple of ways to escape Bell's inequality, and the two that jump to my mind right now are David Bohm's pilot wave theory, which posits the existence of a particle and a guiding wave. And the other possibility, which is something that I suspected when I was first getting into developing paraphilosophy, and that is something called superdeterminism. And now superdeterminism has got way more popular since whenever it was I first came onto the idea, which would have been in 2014. But it's portrayed in a very different way than how I interpreted it back then. If you know anything about superdeterminism, people often talk about how superdeterminism disproves free will because everything's fundamentally determined by physical causes and by physical hidden variables. However, obviously this view is operating in a purely physicalistic ontology without the kind of dualism that paraphilosophy necessitates and the correspondence between this, what is, I accept, a purely deterministic process. It's merely that that deterministic process is correlated with something that allows for free will. If superdeterminism has any validity within paraphilosophy, it would not undermine science, as is typically claimed that superdeterminism would, insofar, again, as our choices to set up an experiment in one way would not be independent from the results of those experiments. In fact, in paraphilosophy, superdeterminism would be the mechanism by which the reality does appear to operate in accordance with natural rules, and it would be the reason why reality is rationally interpretable. It would be a necessary feature of reality, because reality is expressing itself in a way that is rational and logical and which can be studied through science. So yes, reality is putting on a show to us, but it's not doing that to fool us. It's doing that to allow us to gain a reproducible understanding of what's going on in experience, and to evolve to ever higher levels of intelligence. And I think the last thing I would say is that there's this idea, I've not yet gotten around to reading Leibniz, but he has this idea of a pre-established harmony, and I think that kind of could be related to the basic process that's going on in a superdeterministic universe. And again, this is going to be related to psychophysical parallelism, to Jung's idea of synchronicity, and to the idea that you can explain reality purely in terms of science, but that is just the outside you're explaining, and it will always miss half of the image. But that other half of the image is correlated with everything that's going on outside. So, no, free will cannot exist. Everything's determined by natural laws, and yes, free will exists, but your choices don't change anything physical. It's merely that the physical changes your choices would have made if there was free will do happen by luck. It's merely that there's a correlation between the seemingly random outcomes of events and the physical effects that would have happened if your choices did affect physical things. If that makes any sense. Listen to that a few times. I'm sure it will make sense at some point. I'll try it one more time. Now, if we consider that there's some sort of random process going on in the brain, a quantum mechanical process, which allows for the possibility, which allows for multiple possible results. If we consider that the outcome of those results is purely random, these results could be raising my left hand or raising my right hand. There's a 50% chance the outcome is purely random, but I choose to raise my left hand. I have the thought to raise my left hand, but there's a 50-50 chance physically. Now, there will be a correlation between the outcome of a random event, a genuinely random event, and my choices. It's merely that the outcome of the random event, luckily, correlates with my thought. And that happens all the time in all thought. Every thought is correlated with what is otherwise a seemingly random event. However, there are hidden variables, so it isn't genuinely a random event, but for all intents and purposes, it is a random event. There's some kind of higher causality that is determining both our thought and the outcomes of random events. So we don't have free will, but it's just as if we do. And there really is no difference between those two ideas. I mean, I really try to stay away from religious ideas, but you imagine that there was a God, for example, and it would be like saying he's the one choosing. We all think we're choosing, but he's choosing what we're choosing. So we don't have free will, although free will is happening through us. And if we did have free will, this God would choose the exact same thing as we would have chosen, so there's literally no difference. But I want to be clear that I'm just using that as an analogy. There's no necessity for God in this, although there could be some kind of higher causation which can be explicated in rationalistic and secular terms.
If you have any other questions about paraphilosophy or want my opinion on some other philosophical idea, please let me know in the comments below. If you disagree with anything I've said, I invite your challenge. I'm always looking to expand my understanding. If you want to join a community of curious, intelligent, and like-minded souls, you are welcomed into the Paraphilosophy Discord. If you want to learn about paraphilosophy, I humbly ask you to consider buying my book, or gain an introduction by watching the video displayed now. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.